You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield, and economics editor at The Spectator, Kate Andrews. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, The Guardian leads with an alarm of a second heat storm in southern Europe as countries are expecting record temperatures this week. The Metro warns of raw pollution alerts in 54 hotspots as millions prepare for a beach staycation. Rising rates push more households into the red, reads the headline of The Times, as it looks at the impact of the cost of living crisis. The Eye's front page reports on the Labour leader facing anger from his party after ruling out a change to a Conservative policy. PM vows to curb rip-off degrees, reads the front of the Daily Mail, as it looks at controls being introduced to protect university students. The headline of the Daily Express is sex predators stalking Britain's police stations as they look at the number of assaults committed on forced premises. And the Daily Star says experts want people to stop hating seagulls. Well, they should stop attacking us then. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Kevin Schofield and Kate Andrews. Welcome to you both. Let's start with The Guardian and their front page, looking at these extreme weather events that are being experienced across Europe. Kevin, take us into this story.
Yeah, so Southern Europe, obviously, in the past week has already experienced extreme levels of heat and humidity, where warm air coming up from the Sahara, and there's no respite. A second, they call it a heat storm, is going to hit Southern Europe again next week, and potentially could be the hottest ever. Now, at the moment, the record was in Sicily a couple of years ago when it reached 48.8 degrees Celsius, which is 120 degrees Fahrenheit, which is remarkable. It could even exceed that, which is just unthinkable, really, in this country. Ironically, we're experiencing the exact opposite at the moment. We're having a particularly a cool summer, really, which I have to say, if I was given the choice between the weather we're experiencing and what they're having in Southern Europe, that's no contest at all. So, yeah, obviously your heart goes out to people, not just those living there, but obviously tourists will be going to these resorts at this time of year, and you literally cannot go outdoors in it. And if you've got small children in particular, it must be an absolute nightmare. You're having to spend your whole time indoors with the curtains closed, which isn't exactly what you want to be doing on your holidays.
No, indeed not. And Kate, the European Space Agency, it's saying that next week could bring the hottest temperatures ever recorded in Europe.
Yes, it's weather that The Guardian reports is being pushed into the region from North Africa. And as Kevin says, that could lift to a record 48.8 degrees Celsius, which is 120 degrees Fahrenheit, extremely hot weather. And as Kevin points out as well, this can be quite dangerous. A very important reminder, especially to anybody traveling to any of these countries, which many Brits will be doing in the coming weeks, that, you have to stay out of the sun when it's that hot. You have to drink plenty of water, particularly for those who are older and vulnerable. This is being described as a heat storm because these temperatures are going to be so hot and so high. So, a very important reminder to people to stay safe out in the sun. A very different climate to what we're experiencing in Britain, but one that comes with its own difficulties.
Yes, and The Guardian reminding us of a study published recently by Nature Medicine saying that more than 60,000 people died. That's because of last year's summer heat waves across Europe, and the highest mortality rates been seen in Italy, Greece, Spain and Portugal. So it is very serious indeed. Let's have a look at The Eye and this story regarding Sir Keir Starmer facing a backlash, we read, from within his own party, Kevin. Why?
Yeah, so he's given an interview this morning to Laura Kuenssberg, in which I think the main headline from it was him saying that Labour wouldn't scrap the two-child cap on benefits, which is a very controversial policy which was introduced by the Conservatives several years ago. Now, when it was introduced, Keir Starmer was among those who criticised it and said, it should be scrapped. Most recently, the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary just this year, Jonathan Ashworth, described it as heinous. But here we have the Labour leader now saying that if Labour won the next election, they wouldn't scrap it. So you can imagine, absolutely understand why that is causing quite a lot of discord internally within the Labour Party. Union leaders also criticising them. And I think it's part of a wider attack on Keir Starmer that he's just too cautious. He's too worried about rocking the boat, effectively leaving Labour open to criticism from the Conservatives of unfunded spending commitments, and they've decided that they're pretty much going to stick to the Conservative spending plans, at least initially, which is exactly what New Labour did back in 1997. But I think both political and economic circumstances are very different now than they were then. So it'll be interesting to see whether Keir Starmer can withstand the pressure that he's going to come under over this particular policy, because there's no doubt that in the run-up to the next election he's going to come under even more pressure to U-turn on it. At the moment, I would say that's probably unlikely. I think he's more concerned about just presenting Labour as a fiscally responsible, dare I say, small c Conservative party that can't be attacked by the Conservatives as your traditional tax and spend left of centre party.
But at the moment, Kate, it does seem as though he is standing up to shadow cabinet members who have raised their concerns directly with him.
There seems to be an agreement between Keir Starmer and Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves that the most important thing above any particular policy is that whatever Labour announces ahead of the next election has to be fully costed. And you could see the pain that Rachel Reeves had to endure when she rolled back and watered down that pledge for £28 billion of green energy investment. She said we'd get there by the end of a Labour government, but not at the start. And that came down to where was the money going to come from. And it's very clear that fully costing policies is Labour's number one priority. And it's somewhat understandable. After the Liz Truss mini budget last autumn, that wasn't just a lesson for the Tory party, it was a lesson for the Labour Party too. In this new era of higher interest rates, the cost to borrow money going up significantly, even just servicing the debt on money we've already spent is going up by tens of billions of pounds. We saw how international markets reacted to try to do more borrow and spend, as Liz Truss did. It wasn't pretty. That lesson applies to the Labour Party too, and it seems that Starmer and Reeves have realised that. It's going to be very interesting over the next year watching how the shadow cabinet interacts on this topic, because there will be so much pressure on Keir Starmer to shake things up, as Kevin says, to make more commitments in terms of spending, in terms of welfare, that people have spoken out about in the past. But the question is consistently going to be, well, where would you find me that money? Where's the money coming from? And Labour does not want to commit to uncosted policies. And at this point, they're not going to want to commit to higher taxes. They've been willing to do so in the non-dom space and on VAT for private schools. But if it comes to, say, increasing income tax, they're going to be pretty afraid to touch that with the tax burden at a 70-year high. So I think this is going to be a very common theme in terms of the inner politics of the Labour Party going into the next election. Where do you pledge to spend more money? But crucially, where do you find that money to begin with?
And staying with the economy and how it's affecting individuals, the Times looking at the rising rates pushing more households into the red, into negative budgets where their income isn't enough to pay for the roof over their heads, Kevin.
Yeah, so this is Citizens Advice saying that the number of people coming to them for help because they're living beyond their means every single month as a result of mortgage costs going up has doubled in recent months, which is a remarkable statistic. And the thing is as well, it's only going to get worse because lots of people coming off fixed rate mortgage deals over the next year, 2 years, they're all going to suddenly find themselves having to pay much more every month on their mortgages, in the hundreds of pounds more, and at a time when budgets are already stretched because of the high rate of inflation, high energy bills. People just can't find the money, so they're having to, as I say, borrow to try and make ends meet. But the problem there, of course, is that the cost of servicing that debt, just like Kate was talking about with the government, it's the same for families. The era of cheap money is now well and truly over. So if you're having to extend your credit facilities in order to make ends meet, again, it's just kicking the can down the road, and ultimately you're only going to end up in even more trouble. So it's a major concern for the government. Later this week, we're going to have the latest inflation figures. We expect the headline rate to have come down, but core inflation, which when you strip out volatile commodities like fuel, energy, that could well be going up, which could then lead to more interest rate rises in the future. So, anyone hoping that mortgage rates are going to start coming down anytime soon, I think are going to be pretty disappointing, which is bad news for the Conservatives as well.
Yeah, and then the solution doesn't seem to be in sight anytime soon. Kate, the Citizens Advice saying that they're unable to help almost half of those who came to them for financial advice because they'd already cut back their spending to the bare essentials. So people have nowhere else to go. There's nothing left in the pot.
Yes, and it's interesting that Citizens Advice is saying that on average, it was mortgage holders who had a negative budget of about £120 per month, which was significantly higher than those in social housing or the private rental sector. Now, of course, renters have been hit hard too by inflation and rising rates, and the knock-on effect that mortgage holders, buy-to-let landlords are feeling in the rental space is being passed on to those consumers. But, I think a lot of people, politicians included, have done a great disservice to this new generation of home buyers who were essentially told that interest rates would be on the floor forever, that we were in this new era where that was never going to change. And as a result, a lot of people bought homes at the higher end of their budgets, assuming that they would never have to pay higher costs. And we're seeing the huge negative consequences of that. This is going to be a painful time as interest rates, they're not particularly sky high. They're returning to normal historical levels, just ones that we haven't seen in over a decade. And it's a major wake up call, I think, for politicians and for central bankers. Unfortunately, the impact is going to continue to fall on a lot of mortgage holders, consumers, of course, as well, whether you're renting or you own. As prices continue to increase, and because of that, interest rates we think are going to keep going up a little bit more. People with mortgages are really going to feel that bite.
Yeah, indeed. Kate and Kevin, quite a depressing note to go to the break on. Stay right where you are. We are going to take a break at this point. Coming back, we'll be looking at more of the papers, including this on the front of the Metro. Its headline, Staycation Beach Crisis. Stay with us to find out more about that. Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Kate, who is going to take us through the papers. Kate Andrews, editor, economics editor, in fact, at the Spectator. I've just promoted you. Kate's joining us solo for the moment. We hope to get Kevin. He's left us momentarily. But we're going to take you through the rest of the papers now. So we're going to have a look at the Mail, Kate, and this story about the Prime Minister wanting to get rid of so-called rip-off degrees. I mean, what are we talking about in the first instance? What are the examples of these types of degrees that aren't value for money for students?
Well, it looks like they're going to be somewhat wide-ranging, and this is an initiative of the Prime Minister, but the message is coming from the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, who's saying that she wants to look across different sectors in education and at the university level, look at different degrees and look at the ones that are not helping people into well-paid jobs and the ones that aren't offering skills that are needed in the real world. The idea is that they're going to limit the number of places that will be offered because they just don't think that they're providing value for money. I think this is going to prove a bit controversial in the sense that, people might argue that the number one reason to study something isn't necessarily to get as much money as you can afterwards. Another, it may be purely academic and there's merit in that. But this is, of course, what happens when the taxpayer can be on the line for some of these fees that are being racked up. So the government is trying to find that correct balance. But no doubt there's going to be a lot of pushback if and when the government do have to release a list of the degrees that they're going to start capping and have to explain why they don't think those are as useful as others. No doubt people, particularly with those degrees or have sympathy for those degrees, are going to have something to say about that.
Kevin's back with us now. Is this a problem in the first place, Kevin?
Well, I mean, it's something that particularly Conservative politicians have gone on about for years now, this argument about, so-called low-quality degrees And this is the first time, I guess, that the government has tried to actually do something about it. But as Kate says, I think it could run into difficulty when they start trying to identify. I'm not sure, how you drop this list of these degrees are fine, but those ones aren't. And then there's the question as well of, I'd imagine a lot of these degrees are, the students on them might be coming from less advantaged backgrounds, working class backgrounds, and then, there's a chance here that you're basically widening the opportunity gap between the haves and the have-nots. So yeah, it could prove very controversial. On the face of it, it sounds very simplistic and makes a lot of sense. But actually, when you drill down into the details, I think it could definitely run into quite a lot of trouble and will be pretty controversial.
Yes, and sort of rubbishing people's achievements almost. Let's have a look at the Metro, Kate, and many people perhaps wanting to stay home for the holidays, but there's a crisis with our beaches, we read.
Yes, the airports and flights have been a mess, but it turns out if you were hoping to do a staycation or go somewhere else in the UK, particularly to a beach, you could run into a few issues as well, particularly raw sewage, which is being pumped onto dozens of beaches, the Metro reports. This is due to the torrential rain, which has meant that 33 beaches in the southwest are now experiencing sewage pollution. And a group called Surfers Against Sewage are saying that 21 more beaches are at risk. Now, we have to keep this in perspective. Leakages are down a third since the mid-1990s, and 2/3 of beaches in the UK are classified as excellent compared to a quarter of a century ago. So things are moving in the right direction, but a lot more does need to be invested in that infrastructure to make sure we don't run into these circumstances. A horrible set of affairs if you do show up at the beach and have to experience something like this.
Yeah, disgusting. Kevin, you've got about a minute to tell us about King Alcaraz starting his reign.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you watched the final earlier on. Wimbledon finals had an absolute classic five-setter, and it felt like a real changing of the guard. Really, obviously, Novak Djokovic was going for his 8th Wimbledon title, seemingly unbeatable on grass, and then this young fella from Spain, Alcaraz, is definitely the up-and-coming player for the future. And 16 years of a difference, an age difference between them, and at times it showed. I mean, Alcaraz, the shots that he was getting to were absolutely remarkable. So yeah, we could well be seeing the end now of the Djokovic era and the beginning of the Alcaraz era.